Greetings, travelers. Welcome to some low-effort content, featuring myself answering your questions. We had a fairly good response to my questionnaire video. Thankfully, we did not get 2 trillion comments, so I should be able to answer mostly everything. I am just going to go down a list of all the questions I compiled, and I'm not going in any particular order. So let's start from the top. Do you prefer your waifu with thick thighs or slim thighs? Easy answer. Thick thighs save lives. I'm honestly surprised he didn't ask other preferences, but for anime titties, medium is premium, and honestly I prefer small. What jobs do you want in Final Fantasy XIV? Foreskin. A Realm Reborn Breaker 6.0. Extra points if you don't say Time Mage or Apothecary. I think it'd be cool if they add in Geomancer, considering that Geomancers already kind of exist in the Final Fantasy XIV universe. I feel like that's kind of likely and also not super hard to add in. Whatever they do, if they add in a new healer, which they should in the next expansion, I would kind of like to see a similar approach to what they did with Gunbreaker to try to make it have like a diet DPS rotation in it, something to keep it a little bit more interesting. That's pretty much all I would ask for new classes. I don't usually care too much about it. As long as the class is fun to play, I don't really care what the archetype is. Who are you and how did you get here? Well, I'm Misshapen Chair, and this is my pawn shop. But I'd have to ask my parents about how I got here. What is your favorite Final Fantasy? I actually don't play that many Final Fantasy games, although from the very little amounts that I've played, 6 is probably my favorite. Best waifu for the Monogatari series? Well, I think you have a lot of good choices. There's a lot of top-tier waifus in Monogatari, but even after watching most of the series, I still think Senjo Gahara is my favorite girl. While I'm on the topic, my favorite arc, it's called either Koi Monogatari, or the English translation might be Hitagi End. It's the last arc of Monogatari Season 2 is my favorite arc from the whole series. What league supports do you used to play? If you say Brand, I'm unsubbing. I don't even think I ever played Brand. Janna was by far my most played support, just so that you could deny engages all day and then just walk away. My most played after that was Nami and then Thresh. Sometimes Braum, though, was another one that I picked up every now and again. I don't usually play League that much anymore, but these days I'll pretty much just play whatever's the Unga Bunga engage support of the century, so you know, your choice of Leona and Alistar and all the other nonsense that everyone loves right now. What was the funniest moment so far in your time playing Final Fantasy XIV? Well, I'm probably having a little bit of a recency bias on this one, but we were progging through Umbra Savage, and one of our healers, Kalen, asks our other healer, Caleb, if he's having problems with his mana, and to which Caleb says, no, and then Kalen says, yeah, me neither. And everybody just couldn't keep it together at that point, because that whole interaction just has a lot of unpacking to do right there. What part of Final Fantasy XIV do you think needs the most improvement? Well, damn, I could probably make that into a whole video, honestly. Some easy ones off the top of my head. Leveling really needs to be changed. As they have pushed skills further and further back up the leveling tree, leveling to 50 is just boring as fuck, and you don't feel like your class can be completely cohesive until you hit like a much higher level. That's only going to get worse as later expansions come out, so they really need to come up with a solution for that one. And then healing is also kind of a problem right now. They oversimplified a lot of classes. It's kind of weird at the moment because I think healing is the most fun when you're at like the minimum gear tier and you actually have to plan your heals out a lot. But as you get more geared, and even in Savage content, you're basically just mashing one button for 90% of your gameplay. It's incredibly boring. Who is best waifu in Final Fantasy XIV? This is important. Well, I don't know if I have any authority on this, but I believe it is a pretty close choice between Matoya and Matoya. So, on one hand, Y'shtola is a cat girl, which already puts her pretty high up there, but she's also incredibly useful in the plotline and can apparently not see while still seeing, so I don't really understand it too much, but she is cool. And the other choice is Matoya, who lives in a cave all the time and has probably provided the most amount of usefulness to the party outside of anyone from the Scions. So, difficult choice between those two. I think you can pick either, but I'm going to go ahead and say Y'shtola. What is your favorite job to play? Samurai is my favorite job to play at the moment. I think it just flows really well. It's also not difficult to pick up, but it has a lot of optimization that you can do to become really good at it. So it's a really nice class to pick up. I think it's just really solid all around. Even if it doesn't become the best class in the metagame, I'll still probably be playing Samurai. I'm going to answer a couple of questions right here. I had various questions about the origin of my online name, or things like why is the chair misshapen, and the answer is because I have a dump truck ass. Okay, the real answer is when I was about 12 years old at the time, I wanted an online name that didn't require numbers after it. I remember taking a field trip in elementary school and seeing a weird looking chair and thought that the name Misshapen Chair kind of had a nice ring to it and also wasn't already taken on most websites I needed to make an account on. I believe it to be one of the perfect online names because it is simply an adjective and a noun. But yes, if you ever seen Misshapen Chair somewhere online before, it was probably me. I don't think anyone else has ever really used that tag. If I flamed you in a game of League of Legends in the past, it was probably me. What is the first non-MMO game that you played that left a lasting impression on you? And are you Limsa levels of degenerate? The first game that I think I became very obsessed with as a kid is actually Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. I sunk tons of hours into that game, and there was a point where I played it basically every single year. I can still pop that baby in and probably have a good time. But I'll even follow that up. The next game I played after that really left a solid impression on me was Persona 3 FES. It really completely changed the way that I looked at a lot of video games as a form of narrative storytelling. And then as far as what kind of levels of degenerate I am, I will say that I'm probably more of a degenerate, but really the only difference here is that I air my degeneracy out in the open, unlike some other people. But no, I'm definitely not at Limsa levels yet. How does it feel to be the FF14 Moist Critical? Do I really seem like Critical that much? I guess I've watched a lot of his videos over the years, so he's probably rubbed off on me a lot. I guess it would feel pretty good. To be compared to Critical is probably the greatest honor that you can have on the internet. Who are your biggest influences for this channel, and have you played any MMO at a similar level as Final Fantasy XIV? Well, some people kind of can probably already guess based off of just what I've made on my content. I've watched a lot over the years, but the biggest influences are probably Angry Video Game Nerd, Critical, Seth, Pyrocynical, Chugga Conroy, and SSOH PKC. And to answer your second question, no, I've only ever played Final Fantasy XIV as an MMO. This is going to be another multi-answer attack here. Do you plan to do a video for all the jobs in Final Fantasy XIV? As of right now, the answer is yes. I will have to do that before the end of Shadowbringers, so that is pretty much my time limit. Keep in mind, I do have to level everything to 80, and then learn enough about the job to feel like I will only screw up one thing in the video instead of everything. This is my current leveling progress. For the ones that are at 80 that don't have guides yet, you can probably expect those sooner rather than later. How did you get into Final Fantasy XIV? A bunch of my friends played this game originally. We pretty much use it as a way to keep in touch with each other. Most of the people that you see in my static are people that I have known for years and years. And we all got into Final Fantasy XIV together so that we could all just stay in touch. So it's been pretty good for that, but that's the reason why I started playing it. How much money have you spent on Necopara? Like, should we be concerned? I don't really like talking about finances. The short version, I was working as a software engineer until very recently, and I live with my parents. My living expenses are incredibly cheap, so the amount I spend did not set me super far back financially because it was somewhat planned. But the answer is about $6,500. Most of that was paying for the Azuki and Coconut Dakimakudos, which are hard to find and sell for stupid amounts of money if you actually find them. I will probably never spend close to that amount of money on this type of merchandise ever again, but I won't make any promises, and I do not have any regrets. As a new Dragoon, how do I not die? Unbind Elusive Jump. Alright, well, in all honesty, just remember where your animation locks are, and then try to remember where your jumps are, and pray that the boss doesn't decide to leap into the void when you press one of your jumps. That's pretty much all you gotta do on Dragoon, although you'll still probably end up dying anyways. What inspired you to start making Final Fantasy XIV content? I mostly just have a passion for the game. I think I was listening to Work to Game at some point, and they mentioned that there can always be more content creators for Final Fantasy XIV, and I thought, hey, maybe I can do it. I've actually had a lot of public speaking experience before, and my friends have always supported the idea that I could probably do YouTube, so I just kind of went for it. I like to think that I've only gotten better at making videos in these last few months, so we'll see if I can keep it up. I played the game back in Heavensward and early Stormblood, but quit because of the healer changes, generally making the role seemingly a lot simpler to play. Is the role as enjoyable as it once was for you, and what's your favorite expansion? I'm probably not the best person to ask because I did not play too much of the game until Shadowbringers, but for what it's worth, I feel like healing is very fun when you're pretty close to the minimum item level that you need for the content and you actually have to think a lot about healing, and becomes very boring the better geared that you are. My favorite expansion in terms of the content is definitely Stormblood. How get Femboy? I don't know. If I did, I wouldn't be here. Do you enjoy making the videos that you make? Absolutely. I've been having a lot of fun just putting things together. It's cool when I come up with an idea and I actually am able to edit things together. It's just very satisfying, and it's even more satisfying when people actually enjoy watching them. I'm looking to get into VNs, but are there any VNs about being with cute boys? Depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for femboys, Trap Shrine is probably the most easily accessible one, although beyond that, it kind of depends on which ones get translated. I've heard that one is pretty alright if you want to romance femboys. I'm actually not super familiar with the market. The one that I want translated as Stars of Femboy is Otome Domain. My wife wants to know if you're Guilfoyle's little brother. Well, I'll be sure to let your wife know later tonight. Okay, I jest, but seriously, you can't serve it up to me that easy without expecting me to take the bait. No, I'm not Guilfoyle's little brother, but I can probably relate to him. Are we living in a simulation? I can't talk about that. Are you the one uploading your videos to shitpostxiv on Reddit? Yes, I was the one who is uploading them there. I may or may not upload them there again in the future. It just depends on how I feel. Do you have a favorite city-state or sanctuary? Favorite city-state is Kugane. I like architecture in general, but I'm also a massive weeb, so it's pretty easy to like it. How do you go through the process of making a video? Do you sit down and do it all at once, or do you actually plan your videos ahead of time and do some bits here and there? Well, I can answer this one pretty easily. When it comes to making videos, I usually come up with an idea that can come to me at any point in time. Either someone makes a suggestion or I just come up with it myself. I usually do a bit of general script writing to get some ideas down. It's not something that's incredibly specific. It's more just like an outline for some of the things that I want to say. Usually I come back to that from time to time and just kind of brush it up. I usually end up coming with zingers here and there from just random inspiration. Like in my social hierarchy video when I make that comment about sentient garbage, that was something that just came to me at one point. I thought, yeah, I can slide that into the video. So it's pretty much just stuff like that. As far as the editing process goes, I usually just sit down and start doing it. And once I'm in a groove, I just keep going until I feel like it's at a good enough point. I usually can't really stop myself once I'm in the zone while editing, so it just kind of goes on until I either pass out or I complete the video. How much time on average do you spend editing videos? It will depend on the video, depending on how many clips I want to include, how much animation I want to do, such as like freeze frames and just moving things around on screen. All that takes extra time. I am better at editing now than when I first started things, and now that I have a piece of software that I like and I'm pretty good at using it, video editing can take as long as 20 hours for one video, or it can be as short as like just a couple, depending on what I have to do. How did you get so sarcastic, or is it just natural talent? Well, I actually have a little bit of a story for this one. I've always had this personality for pretty much my entire life. In elementary school, I was pulled out of class for being quote-unquote too negative. I don't even remember the context. I mean, in my kid brain, I couldn't even understand it. But for parent-teacher conferences, my teacher brought this up to my mom, and my mom replied with, yeah, he gets it from his mother. So probably a combination of genetics and the fact that my parents never policed it, so I was able to refine my sarcasm more over the years. When are we getting the definitive Final Fantasy XIV waifu tier list? Well, if it's something that my fans want, I can start working on it. I have absolutely no idea if I would give you a timeline on that one. I'd have to think about it a lot. I haven't even started looking at it. I'd first have to come up with a list of characters I want to include and come up with some really spicy takes so that I can make it controversial enough that it gets shared with everybody. But I don't actually have any plans for it at the moment. Can you please do a Final Fantasy XIV race hierarchy video? Maybe. Why does your husbando tier list not have Ilberd? Well, to be completely honest, I forgot he existed. Will you remember us when you get famous? Man, I can't even remember people's names of the people that I probably should. Also, I'm surprised that your people are much more optimistic than I am. I don't think I'm going to become that famous. Either way, I might remember you, but the answer is probably not. But that's not because of anything malicious. It's just because I have a hard time remembering people. Did you expect this channel to get this big when you created it? Absolutely not. I'm still surprised that the number keeps growing. I mean, this is the response video to my 1,000 subscriber video, and as of recording this, I'm at about 1,400 subscribers right now. So it's been pretty insane recently, but I absolutely did not expect to get this popular at all. What do you do when you're not playing video games? I do have a couple of additional hobbies. I do play a lot of VNs, and I watch a lot of anime, which makes me a very stereotypical Final Fantasy XIV player. I do also play some instruments in my free time. I used to play a lot more, but I pretty much keep up piano every now and again. What microphone do you use? Pseudotac is the brand. I don't remember which one it is specifically. It was about $35. It was called a podcast/streaming microphone. My only issue that I have with it is that it can be very quiet if I'm not right in front of it. What is your favorite video game? Persona 5 Royal is my favorite video game of all time. I'm a huge fan of the Persona series, and I believe it to be the best one, in my opinion. I do see why people like all the games, but that one is my favorite. Do you play mainline Shin Megami Tensei? No, I haven't really played much of any of the Shin Megami Tensei games. I'm not completely disinterested in them, but I do have to be in the mood to get very upset if I want to play them. I plan on playing the newest one when it comes out, and I might play the remake of Shin Megami Tensei 3 as well, depending. Best or favorite Shadowbringers song and dungeon? Okay, for song, I think High Treason is my favorite song from Shadowbringers, just because it's stuck in my head 24/7. Heroes Gauntlet's still probably my favorite dungeon. I like the music, and I just like the fact that it uses a bunch of similar classes to what we have in all of Final Fantasy XIV. It feels kind of like a tribute to the game. Favorite music, one from Final Fantasy and one from anywhere else. My favorite Final Fantasy song is the Final Fantasy X version of To Xanarken. I think it's a really nice song, even though it kind of gets memed to death. Any other song? I'll just pick the Pavlovitsian dances, specifically the movement with the oboe solo at the beginning. It's one of these songs that I've listened a lot to over the years, and it's just a really nice piece of music. What has been your favorite fight so far? Least favorite? Do certain mechanics just kill a fight for you? Down for the count. I probably don't have the best answer to this. I actually haven't been running hard content for that long. The first hard fight I ever beat was Titania Extreme. I still think that's a pretty fun fight though, even though some of the mechanics are pretty chaotic. I think that's what makes it entertaining. My least favorite fight is probably Fulmination, because it took R-Static a very long time to get it down, and the mechanics in there are just so easy to screw up and kill the entire party. It's just very, very frustrating. As far as my opinions on mechanics that kill fights, I do think Down for the Count is very annoying. I don't really like cinematics in fights. I feel like it's fun the first time, and then it's just annoying every single time you run it afterwards. Why would you ever use Hisatsu Seigen over Hisatsu Shinten? I think I talked about this in my Samurai video, but maybe I messed up. Either way, Hisatsu Seigen does more damage per gauge compared to Hisatsu Shinten. That doesn't mean that it's always optimal, because it kind of messes with your Kenki gauge a little bit, but that is the answer. If you are trying to truly optimize and you're going to be taking raid-wide damage anyways, using Hisatsu Seigen whenever you can will be an overall DPS increase. Is Bingo the name of the dog or Old MacDonald? Bingo is the name of the dog. Can you perform differential calculus to determine that Grahatia, ex-Warrior of Light, is in fact the true one-true pair of Final Fantasy XIV? Show your work. Well, you gave me an easy way out on this one. No, I cannot. I play male Mikote Dancer against your suggestion. I have fixed it by wearing a Chocobo outfit with the fat Chocobo headpiece. How angry does this make you? Well, first, it was not a suggestion, it was an observation, and second, I couldn't care less. Which data center and realm are you on? Let's savage it up. It's not exactly a secret. I'm on Adamantoise on the Aether data center. I don't have plans to play with fans at the moment, but maybe I can make that into something in the future. Okay, but your anime figure collection, do share. Alright, pretty easy. Here's a couple of different pictures that I can show you of various ones that I have. I won't mention too much about each of them. They're just going to flash by pretty quickly. The only thing that you need to know is that this Azuki is very big compared to all the other ones that I have. Any gaming moment equivalent to finally getting Genichiro's pattern and rhythm down pat. Beating Orphan of Kos for the first time in the Bloodborne DLC is probably one of the biggest highs I've ever had in gaming. It took me so many hours to actually get that fight down to the point where I could finally beat it. Thankfully, nobody was home at the time, so when I popped the fuck off, they didn't have to hear how loud I was. Do you think the new class will finally be Inspector so they can bring Hildebrand back? Well, I don't care if they add Inspector or not, they better bring him back anyways. How are the tax benefits from marriage going along? Or are there other problems in a tax-free paradise? Well, now I finally know what it's like to be a billionaire in real life and not have to pay taxes on anything, but all you have to do is get married in Final Fantasy XIV. There's really no problems. There's a lot of less stress when you don't have to worry about taxes. Pineapple on pizza? I'm not personally a fan. How can your voice sound so sexy and make me feel unworthy at the same time? And yes, I'm a straight male, I think. Well, I don't really change too much about my voice. I think I was putting on a little bit more of a fake voice when I first started making YouTube videos just to get used to talking to myself in my room, and I think I've slowly become a little bit closer to what I naturally sound like over time. I am projecting my voice when I make these YouTube videos. If I talk a little bit quieter, I mean, this is pretty close to what I sound like normally. You don't really have to worry about your heterosexuality if you like another guy's voice. The only time you have to be concerned about your sexuality is when you start liking dick, and in that case you might be at least a little bit bi-curious. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you were to advise a party of 2 people who are starting their adventure together in Final Fantasy XIV, what combination of jobs would you suggest? Bonus, we took a Dragoon and a White Mage. What do you think about it? I would say, don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter too much what job that you pick to play. The only recommendation I would have for 2 people who want to play together is that at least one of you is playing a tank or a healer so that your queue times are not completely miserable. Since one of you is a White Mage, you really don't have to be concerned about that. And even though you're playing Dragoon, you'll get used to dying eventually. What is your mother's maiden name? And also how much gasoline is required to light the entirety of Balmung's Ul'dah on fire? My mother's maiden name is Redacted, and like 5 or 6 gasoline. Why do all your VNs you play have the most vanilla tags ever? I thought that was obvious. It's because vanilla is my waifu. Yes or no? Well, most people would say yes, but my family raised me right, so I know that the answer is no. Thoughts on Red Mage? I think it's a pretty fun class. Dual cast is an interesting passive that they built the entire class around. The only change they really would need to make to this is to change Embolden so it just buffs all damage similar to what they did with Brotherhood, and I think everybody will be happy. What is the worst thing you have seen in Limsa? I actually don't remember anything specifically, but back when I used to play on a specific different server, I received a very creepy PM, and that's probably my worst experience with that part of the community. These next series of comments are not questions, they are just people who wanted to let everyone know that they were here at 1,000 subscribers. The last question here is going to have a bit of a spoiler warning if you have not caught up to the main story as of patch 5.4. What do you think about the direction of the game's story going with the new Ashian seemingly pointless haha I'm evil plan? Well, I do think it entirely depends on how they want to develop the character from here. A nihilistic villain is something that can work, but I do think his introduction is pretty terrible because we have no idea why he seemingly wants to destroy everything in the universe and himself. When he just says that up front and we don't know the motivation behind it, it seems really shallow. But if he ends up getting a very solid character arc where we can understand his motivations for why he is that way, he could end up being a really good character. So I think it's entirely dependent on what the next expansion looks like, but for what it's worth, I think his introduction was awful. And with that, that's everything I wanted to answer in my AMA video. This ended up taking a lot longer to compile everything and make than I thought. I don't really plan on doing many of these in the future since I do live stream. I might put some more casual live streams up just so that people can chat with me if they really want me to answer some other questions. But don't expect anything like this again because it's a lot harder than I thought it would be. Now let's get out there and demand that I make a waifu tier list.